And thank you all for coming, and all of you that are watching the live stream, welcome. I just wanted to give a few reminders, especially to make sure that we make the meeting as safe as possible for everyone. One is to please make sure that the badge you received when you checked in, that you wear it at all times as you're accessing the meeting rooms. We'll be looking for the badges as we come in. A reminder about the masking policy. Masks are required in every room except when you're actively eating and drinking in a room that's serving food and beverages. The one exception is in the plenary rooms like this one. The speaker is given the option to unmask if they feel comfortable doing so. So those are the only times we should not be wearing masks in the buildings. Finally, those of you who have registered and noticed that we have several protocols in place for safe evolution, so everyone experiences this conference without any inappropriate behavior. There are posters that tell you how to report any inappropriate behavior that you experience, but we also, please keep a lookout for several people that are wearing these badges, these EVO allies that can provide you any kind of support or information in that case. So we hope this is a wonderful, safe, enjoyable meeting full of good science and great interactions. And so now I'll turn the stage over to Leslie Rissler, who will introduce our Gould awardee. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. I wanted to say good evening, but today was not a good day. Today, of all days, it's clear that we do not live in a society that provides equal protections and rights to all citizens. There's racism, there's sexism, it's explicit, it's implicit, and this morning, 50% of the population of this country, 50%, had more rights than we do right now. Today is a significant day in our country's history, and I can't stand up here and not mention it at all. But it seems like we keep experiencing significant days over and over and over again during these past few years. And it has become exhausting, heartbreaking, and infuriating. And I feel it. But we have to continue fighting for our values and for our rights, and for those who don't have the power to make change. And we need to do that with whatever sphere of influence that we have. Today's Gould winner, Dr. Lisa White, comes from a family of activists and educators. She's dedicated her life to science, to education, to diversity and inclusion. So I am excited that she is honored tonight with the Stephen J. Gould Award. Dr. White is the Director of Education and Outreach for the University of California Museum of Paleontology at UC Berkeley. Before that, she was chair of the Department of Geosciences at San Francisco State University and served as Associate Dean of the Division of Graduate Studies and for the College of Science and Engineering at San Francisco State University. And before I tell you a little bit about her exceptional evolution outreach, I'm going to share a bit about her background. Dr. White tells me she's a proud San Franciscan. She told me her parents met as undergraduates at San Francisco State in the 1960s. Her late father, in fact, pioneered the field of Black psychology and became professor of psychology and dean of undergraduate studies at San Francisco State in the 1960s. Lisa followed in her father's footsteps, did her undergraduate degree at San Francisco State in geology, and as I mentioned earlier, spent her tenure track years at that same institution, clearly continuing her family's commitment to diversity, inclusion, and access to public higher education. Dr. White has received many honors and awards, including the American Geophysical Union's Presidential Citation for collaborative work on the team No Time for Silence, a call to action for an anti-racist scientist community. She's currently chair of the AGU Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Committee, and way back in 1994, she was a featured scientist, the way cool scientist, on Bill Nye the Science Guy. I think it's very cool. For the Gould Award, Dr. White is honored for her commitment to advancing public understanding of evolutionary science and its importance in biology, education, and everyday life in the spirit of Stephen Jay Gould. From her nomination letter, I'll quote, "To summarize, Dr. Lisa White is an outstanding educator who has dedicated her career to increasing public awareness of the biosciences and geosciences and has been a tireless force for building a more diverse and inclusive scientific community." Let's give a warm welcome to Dr. Lisa White.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you, Leslie, for that wonderful introduction, for your warm welcome. I'm just so incredibly honored and humbled by this prize. Being included in the same group with the previous awardees is a real source of inspiration for me, additional motivation as well to continue the work that I do. And as Leslie mentioned, coming from a family of activists and educators, we vote with our feet, we get out in front, we're active, we, are raucous, and I was the low-key member of the family, so, I had to learn from my role models. But I'm hoping that I can inspire a sense of what can be done in many of you, what's possible in our communities of science to better communicate what it is that we do and facilitate additional connections so that everyone feels as excited, about our science as we do. And you'll be hearing about a number of programs that I direct at the University of California Museum of Paleontology. I'll also draw from a number of programs that I directed during my professor years at San Francisco State University, working with urban youth, working with teachers, really getting folks to connect to evolutionary science as well as earth science. And I think we learn best, we communicate better when we can share stories and bring really our own experiences to life. So I hope you'll indulge me this evening while I share a bit about my science journey and how that's continued to really motivate me to want to do this kind of work. So in general, I'll just start with, a few highs and, occasional lows in this, journey that is very much what we do as scientists. It's hard not to underestimate the importance of modeling what it is that we do, whether we're modeling some aspect of our science for others to understand, or modeling as scientists for young people who may aspire to do what we do. There's a central place for representing, highlighting, sharing our science in a way that people can relate and better understand what it is that we do. And I've tried to fold that sort of work, being present in science, modeling good practices, showing how accessible our disciplines are in the whole scope of the JEDI work. So justice and equity and diversity and inclusion, how can we lead in these areas and draw from our scientific specialties to motivate others to want to do the work and to really think about the culture that we have found ourselves in the STEM disciplines, that sometimes no matter what we do to extend good role models and break down the nature and process of science so that everyone is included, there are some fundamental problems with the culture of many of our science disciplines. And I think it's important to touch on that as well and think about what are some things that we can do in our labs, in our departments, at our universities, within our professional societies to really advance our ability to include everyone. And at the heart of what really motivates me in my work is sharing evolutionary science with others. And I've certainly benefited from being in the position of Director of Education and Outreach at the UC Museum of Paleontology, overseeing our Understanding Evolution website. We are really excited with some of the additional things that we're doing to extend evolution education, including creating an escape room style game that will pop up in a city near you, we hope. And so we want to continue thinking about what are some ways we can further facilitate engagement in evolution education, make it more accessible for individuals in all communities, and really inspire more innovation in the way that we share our science with the public. When I think about some of my role models, certainly starting with my parents, as Leslie mentioned, my late father, Joseph L. White, really helped create the field of Black psychology. Now, his ego could fill this room, so according to him, he was the godfather of Black psychology. But there's always a community of people that initiate disciplines. But he and my mother did meet in the 1950s in San Francisco, at San Francisco State University, when it was really just beginning to expand then, and became more accessible for first-generation college students. And both my parents were first-gen college students. And he took to psychology and became really concerned that when health professionals evaluated many communities of color, they used the same standards and the same assumptions as they would with many white families. And so Black families in particular would come up on the short end of all that. So it labels this dysfunctional family, if it was headed by a single parent, as somehow being lacking in something was really frustrating. And so throughout his life's work, he really set to shine a brighter lens on the Black experience, really thinking about the unique experiences of African American men and African American families. And although I was more interested in the arts and eventually science, I found myself really thinking about how you should really try to represent the whole of experience, everyone. And when I entered San Francisco State University as an undergraduate in the 70s, I was an art major, photography. I wanted to do outdoor and nature photography, and it was really through a geoscience course I took to learn more about the landscape so I could be a better photographer that I got bitten by the earth science bug. And I suppose eventually I was going to, merge these two areas of my life, the family commitment to diversity and access and inclusion, and, being super excited about this science. And so I'll highlight just some steps along the way where I found myself in these positions as chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee at the American Geophysical Union, or chairing a real call to action over these last 2 years for scientists to listen and learn and lead when it comes to inclusion and diversity. But role models come in all forms, and here is my best, Ansel Adams interpretation or pose. So, as I mentioned, I was really motivated by the arts. San Francisco, it's always an interesting city, but particularly when I was growing up, there was so much music, so much art. My two older sisters were very much into the arts, so I was following them a lot, but was certainly drawn to photography. And I wondered, could I be the Black female Ansel Adams? I really want to try this out. So honestly, I was not very good, but, I was trying to make this work. And so, as I mentioned, I took a geology class. I thought, well, maybe one skill, I can add here to become a better photographer is just learn more about these landscapes that so inspired me to photograph. So that was the goal, but, you change your mind, you pivot. And the year that I took my first geoscience course, Mount St. Helens erupted in Washington State, and being on the West Coast, it seemed so real and such a strong reminder of the dynamic nature of the Earth. And so I was just drawn to that and found myself wondering, I liked science at one time. I grew up near the California Academy of Sciences in Golden Gate Park and was always intrigued by the fossil and rock displays, and didn't really associate, though, those displays and museum exhibits with an actual career. But at the same time, I had so many different interests, it was quite hard to focus. But at some point, I thought, okay, I think I can bring all of this together. And fast forward, after I finished at San Francisco State with my geology degree, had interned at the U.S. Geological Survey to get some experience outside of the major. And as I finished my doctoral degree at UC Santa Cruz, there was an opportunity to be a professor at San Francisco State. So again, following in this family tradition, it seemed like such a wonderful chance to bring a lot of me to this position, really try to influence many of the urban youth that I enjoyed working with, even as my time as a student, and come back to those same landscapes that inspired me in what I thought was going to be, my first profession and major as a landscape photographer. And I wanted to reference in particular this particular program that I coordinated at San Francisco State called SF Rocks. So reaching out to communities and kids with science in San Francisco. And so with this program, we would engage urban youth not only in earth science experiences in the San Francisco Bay Area, but we joined forces with several other universities to bring students that normally wouldn't have an opportunity to see national parks in the West and enjoy science outdoors, think about natural history, and why it is that we study these places, do that as an inspiration for studying science. And one particular trip I remember, we were on our way to Utah. The center photo, the upper photo in the center there is from the Goblin Valley in Utah. Below that, you all might recognize Bryce National Park, for those that you've been to the Utah parks. That's Canyonlands on the left, and the two photographs there on the right are right in San Francisco. So really taking students out to areas local and national as a way to inspire some motivation to study science. So one particular year, we were on our way to Utah, driving, meeting the rest of the groups, the other university groups. And we had prepared the students. I made them a guidebook, had talked to their parents about all the places we were going to go, what they were going to see. There was a glossary of terms. I had everything from the plants and insects we might see along the way to, the rocks and land formations. But we get to the first spot, and a student asked me, "Is this real?" And I was so taken aback. I wasn't sure at first what he meant. I didn't know if he thought maybe we just put up a display, or at Disneyland where there's fake rocks that someone, makes an outcrop for your enjoyment. And so I talked, first I was angry too. I thought, oh my goodness, we just spent all this NSF money to get you here. I prepared you for this trip, and you're going to ask me if what we're looking at is a natural feature. But after some conversation, what he was essentially saying, and what I came to understand, is there's sometimes not that much in a person's background that prepares them for, the full suite of experiences that you may have when you're first learning about a science. So that gave me the additional motivation to keep doing those kinds of trips, to be certain whenever we were developing a program, whether it was lab-based or field-based, to not assume that everyone can relate to what you're seeing in the same way. And coming to a place like Berkeley that's steeped in tradition, where we have one of the largest fossil collections associated with a university museum anywhere in the country, and so much of our history in the museum is tied to California history. We have collections that were made by Geological Survey of California parties in the gold rush days when they were mapping for mineral resources for gold. Any fossil resources they would encounter would become part of the collections too. So that's part of these 5 million specimens that we have that include many tens of thousands of typed and figured specimens. It's important in the work that I do for students, not only at Berkeley, but we have a community college network of students that are within the scope of what we do, and so ensuring that they understand or have opportunities to understand and engage with why fossil collections are so important when it comes to understanding evolution, when it comes to highlighting biodiversity, whether it be in deep time or modern time. What are some things that we can understand and learn about climate change? But I'm surrounded by tradition at Berkeley, and every once in a while I want to just add to some of the photos that are on the wall. You know, I'm not trying to be on Mount Rushmore or be a poster child for, you know, any of this many times when it comes to, you know, how we represent what it is that we do. But whenever I am shaping programs for youth and really thinking about the next generation, how we project who we are, who's included, and the work that we do makes for, I think, an important exercise in just juxtaposing the old and the new, you know, how they did it back in the day, how we do field work now, you know, what were some of the things that must have been occurring there for people really of privilege. Those were the ones that did science then, to be able to collect the resources that we have in the museum today, and then what are the opportunities for us as scientists, as field scientists, to continue the story and the narrative and add to the resources that we have at the museum. And students have a field day many times with the kind of work that I do and wanting to just show, you know, museums of the 21st century aren't beholden to the history of the past. But I did mention, you know, given the nature of where I work and the traditions at Berkeley and our collection really that predates the chartering of the University of California system, as I mentioned, many of our earliest collections were made by these field parties that were going out and mapping resources in California. So we protect those resources, those earliest of collections. But a student was particularly inspired some years ago during Black History Month. He was a young artist, and asked if we could make a postage stamp, you know, with me on it. And I said, well, I don't think that is the best. He said, no, it's just, we're not going to send it in or lobby for you to be on a postage stamp. You know, I just want to represent, you know, better, some role models. So I said, okay, because you never know, right, where a student might be inspired or how it is that they express, you know, what they're interested in, what they want to do, and how they hope that people do include, you know, just ordinary folks in the kind of models that they do. Now, I've showed up in a few comic books, although this series is very fun. There are these trading cards, and it's a book about superheroes and science. And I often lead when these opportunities come up by just trying to lead with the fossils. You know, I actually don't study dinosaurs. I specialize in diatom microfossils, so single-celled plants. But of course, when you're a paleontologist who's showing up in a kid's book, you're a dinosaur paleontologist, so I just ride with it sometimes. But I thought, can we at least show that I, you know, need a magnifying glass or a microscope, you know, to examine the fossils that I study? So that was the nice compromise there. And in more recent years, so in my when I am working within the research community that my specialty is closest to in ocean science, I participated in research cruises where we're able to core deep in the ocean and bring up the material from the seafloor. And so diatoms, as well as other microfossils, are present in those seafloor sediments, and that is critical to dating the age of the seafloor, understanding ocean history and chemistry through the evolution of the species that we see within those ages of cores. And one of the science artists that participates in some of these research cruises has a series called I Was a Kid. And so she loves to help all of us scientists that participate in these research expeditions really reflect on what motivated us when we were children that eventually got us on a path to science. And so I usually start with, well, I wasn't one of those kids who wanted to be a dinosaur expert. I mean, I loved my local museum, but I wanted to be a photographer and then hang out and listen to music the whole rest of the time. So we figured out a way to capture part of that story, the photography side, to, include it in this journey, in my journey. But, everyone has a history. Not everyone's path in science is linear. Most of us have ways that, we've come to our science that may be different from your advisors or your major professor or your colleagues, and that's okay. I mean, there's room for all of those pathways in what we do. And I've been especially motivated in recent years to work with community colleges, college students, community college faculty, to advance paleontology and understanding of evolution through engaging them in museum visits, working with instructors at two-year colleges to include and expand curriculum in evolutionary biology to include evidence from the deep time record of life. Our Access Paleo program, so advancing community college education student success, has been a critical training ground for graduate students at the museum. In fact, it was a graduate student who really initiated this work because he taught community college between his master's program and coming to Berkeley as a doctoral student, and just kept asking me, why aren't we doing more for community colleges? You throw a stone in any direction in the Bay Area, and there's, half a dozen community colleges in that county. So I really had no excuse. So he wore me down. I mean, it didn't take much, but eventually I said, yeah, we should be doing something. So really pulling together the opportunity through graduate student mentors and docents to bring graduate students to the museum was pivotal in the way that we continue to shape materials. And during the pandemic, we transferred a lot of the in-person labs that we created when we were doing tours to a virtual lab series that allowed us to expand the program even beyond the San Francisco Bay Area, because we got on a number of two-year college listservs and wanted to be sure that both first-year biology and first-year earth science courses that had elements of paleontology, biodiversity, evolution, had additional resources that they could use for that. And we shaped some with some particular requests in mind. And it's been great, again, to have graduate students lead this effort. And it goes without saying the kind of training and experience they receive in communicating science and creating learning materials and being able to draw from the digital record that we have in our science, in paleontology, that includes really amazing, three-dimensional models of organisms, lots of supplementary material. We have a number of web resources in what we call our Understanding series, leading with Understanding Evolution, but also Understanding Science, and now Understanding Global Change is our newest web resource. But we want to be there and factor really in all of these interrelated sciences, from evolution to biodiversity, to thinking about deep time, to climate change, to the ways that museums can continue to elevate the importance of collections if we're to understand all of the diversity of life. And so it's been terrific to be able to not only create these resources with graduate students in the lead, but also share with others. And so we have some publications that we've worked on. You're welcome, by the way. I should have, I guess, mentioned this in the beginning of the talk, and I know that we're recording, but if you want to take a photograph of any of the slides, that you're welcome, and that QR code will take you to the publication that represents some of the work that we did with the Access Labs for community college classes as we were reshaping them during the pandemic. And it was really our intention to utilize a number of UCMP resources. As I mentioned, our resources in the Understanding series, Understanding Evolution, Understanding Science, the Digital Atlas of Ancient Life, so one of our partner museums, the Paleontological Resources or Paleontological Research Institution, Ithaca, which manages the Digital Atlas of Ancient Life, where there are a lot of really amazing three-dimensional models and high-resolution images that make their way into these modules. And the paleobiology database, so really being able to draw from the fossil record of life to highlight biodiversity, to quantify change, to really further understand changes in biodiversity through time. So just really leveraging a range of resources at our fingertips to try to excite people about paleontology resources, about evolutionary science, about how science works, really remains a motivation. And so at the heart of a lot of our work is extending what is our most popular website. So 15 years later, it continues to receive more than 1.5 million page views every month, particularly at the beginning of the school year. It peaks. And we've wanted over the years for it just continue to be the reliable source of information on all things evolution, whether one teaches at the primary grades or at the college level. There are resources that are shaped for that particular level, tied to the national standards in science for the K through 12 levels, and really a resource for those who may live in a district where teaching evolution is problematic, where they have to respond to parent inquiries about evolution, and realize that half the class may feel conflicted or not believe in evolution. So there are many, many portals into the resources on this site and lots of ways to use it. We've really tried to upgrade the site over the years. A recent grant allowed us to give the site a facelift, if you would, and have a new look, and also some additional features that enhance navigation on the site, accessibility. We also are excited to include more profiles on evolutionary biologists and scientists whose work in biology and evolution is leading the way. We want people to come away with a sense of the investigative nature of our science and how discoveries are ongoing and continue to just fuel and drive why we're motivated to do this work. As I was mentioning in the beginning about just the importance of role models and being able to highlight people who look and are different from ways individuals might think all scientists look, to be able to highlight their work and profile just the importance of not only the scientists that are doing the work, but how evolutionary science really intersects all aspects of our lives. And whether you're really digging into data or sharing our science with students in ways that benefit from games and puzzles and mysteries and rich graphics, we're just excited to continue working on this website. But we also have been really thinking outside the proverbial box and wanting to bring evolution education to public audiences in ways that we haven't done before. And we were recently funded by a grant from the National Institutes of Health to develop a physical structure. So the schematic that you see there is of what will be about a 30-foot inflatable structure made to look like a field trailer. And so inside, a group of people, ideally played with families or friends, appropriate from middle school grades on up. So we engage users in an escape room style game. So the trailer will be partitioned. So each room will have a series of puzzles that draw from a challenge, which in the case of this game, there is a group of venomous snakes that bite a biologist while she's out in the field trying to do work. And how's she supposed to do her work if she's gotten bitten by this venomous snake? So your challenge is to figure out the antivenom, but you have to understand some of the plants in the area and what might be the ingredients for this anti-venom. So there are a lot of great activities that we will have as part of this escape room game that challenge one to really think about phylogenetic relationships between organisms, traits, changes through time, and communicating evolution in this way that includes puzzles and games and these challenges. We think it's just a great way to take understanding evolution and evolution education in a different direction. And so we, together with about a dozen other partners, and we've been delighted to work with the University of Kansas Natural History Museum, but we have other partners in the Midwest, also in the Northeast and in the West, where we will send this inflatable structure that will fully deflate and be able to fit in a couple of crates to move around. But here's some examples of just some of the games that will be there. So in order to unlock this biomedical mystery, you do have to understand some relationships between organisms. What are some shared characters? What are some traits? We, in cartoon style, will feature some actual researchers whose focus is on venomous snakes, and make, again, some additional game opportunities to think about how these connections are made. Here's some examples of the prototypes of the game. And so in the beginning, just to sort of whet people's appetites and get them used to thinking about phylogenetic trees, we have fun with some different kinds of animals and some fantastical creatures. And we set up, again, what it might be like, if you're working in this tropical area and challenged with coming up with the antivenom. You're going to have to get some ingredients to make this antivenom, including some plants in the area. So you're going to need to assess some traits. You're going to need to build a tree to figure out what these relationships are between organisms. And so reconstructing this history, creating the antivenom, saving the world. Again, we just want to make it fun for young people. So we've tested it out with family and friends groups. Kids as young as about 10 years old or so have experienced this game. Actually, some of the kids in one of the photos look a little younger than that, but with their families, they've been able to solve these puzzles. And we have takeaway media, flexible post-game activities that we're planning as part of the post-experience engagement. And so we're hoping that families and friends, young people, adults will continue to want to learn about evolution and relationships between organisms, and how evolutionary science is part of our everyday lives and can save lives by engaging in this game. And we've really thrown in some of the things that are fun for us too, like Twister games. Like, who doesn't love Twister? And this game idea is really the work of Anna Thanukos, who is one of my staff persons, who is the lead editor of Understanding Evolution, and she loves escape rooms. So we just mashed it up. So, escape room meets Understanding Evolution, and in about another year, the pop-up structure will be ready, and so we'll be ready to start sending this on the road. And here are just some additional highlights of just some of the progress so far in the first 2 years of the grant, testing the interactive games, getting feedback, getting some initial formative evaluation to help us, again, shape this game, and just really having fun with the props. So what I really, really enjoy most about working at a museum, and after having been primarily a formal educator as a professor for 22 years, doing most of my teaching in the classroom, there's just so much joy in working with informal audiences and feeling like there's really a possibility, to just do something different. Let's just put some ideas on the table and see if we can get some funding for this. And let's just go for it and try, again, to engage people, all communities, whether rural or urban, in an evolution education experience that they hopefully will not forget. And let's not forget to continue to use role models and scientists for this next generation of youth that may aspire to be a specialist who focuses on venomous snakes or who may want to develop anti-venom. And so whatever their goal may be, finding their place in the science, I think, is really important. And, along the way, too, we've really wanted to not only be a source of information, so understanding evolution, great source of information, but you want folks to be able to put the information together and really acquire that knowledge that allows them to go forward if they choose this science. So let me move along a bit in the last couple minutes of the talk to say that, underlying a lot of what we do in our work at the UC Museum of Paleontology does tie not only to understanding evolution, but also understanding science. And so, reminding our audiences and sharing ways with them that show, in explicit fashion, how much science is exploration and discovery. It depends on testing ideas and benefits from community analysis and feedback, and the outcomes are typically beneficial to society. And so when you do the work of science, whether you're in this escape room or, learning about other aspects of our science, there are plenty of ways that it reaches and impacts other parts of science and really helps one acquire the kind of knowledge that I think can really excite one about why we do this work. But, these aren't always easy times to be a science communicator, to promote understanding evolution and other aspects of science, and also try to push us forward when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And although it seems like nearly my whole career I've been working on these issues, it goes without saying that the last 2 years have really accelerated, I think, the need for us in particular to come together around DEI work and recognize that we really can't function wholly as a society if we're not at full capacity, and encouraging really individuals from all backgrounds to want to be part of the STEM enterprise. And individuals can't fully feel like they're contributing if they're constantly burdened by racism and discrimination. So the more that we can do from the outset to recognize that there are things that we should be changing and dismantling in our classic structures and the way that we educate and engage people, then the better for all of us. And when you just examine, so many global problems today, the solutions typically do come from scientists, and the solutions are enhanced and informed by new ideas, and certainly from individuals that are not, haven't traditionally been welcome. And for those of us that do field science, I think a lot about the images that we project. This whole all hands on deck. We often share that our deck's so beautiful. It's like, come to a tropical island, help us collect, insects, plants, or in my case, fossils. Your new project will really benefit from your input, and you'll have fun in this warm tropical paradise. But then the students come out with us, and sometimes their experience is more like this. So we need to be mindful of what we project, as scientists, what our own experiences have been, and, and what it might end up being for a person who is first generation or doesn't have the depth of field experience, or perhaps we didn't prepare them for what we were planning. And maybe the level of engagement, again, was different than we expected. So really thinking about this and who the burden is on, and it shouldn't be on the students that we're trying to recruit, the communities that we're trying to bring to the table. A colleague at NSF in the Geoscience Directorate often says to us, don't always try to fix the fish, the students. He's like, maybe the water's nasty. It's like, maybe the environments that we put them in are toxic. So, it's time to just abandon some of these deficit models, assuming that the problem is with the person who's not a part of our community already. But no, it's like maybe the problem sometimes is us. Our community, the ways that we've become used to doing things often aren't so inviting. And so, again, just reflecting on the last couple of years, all these undeniable forces demanding change, I don't want us to lose the kind of motivation that we saw, early in 2020 through mid-2020 after the George Floyd murder. In addition, the early part of the pandemic, there was a sense of just trying to come together as a nation to try to change, solve problems, just address racism. I already worry that it's waning. And of course, we have new, even more urgent problems now with just our rights being taken away on so many levels. But what we do as STEM professionals matters, it's applicable, we can lead, we can apply it in ways that inspire people to want to be part of the STEM workforce and to want to work on policy and, and educational materials and ways of training the next generation so that they feel they can be activists as scientists as well. And so I hope that we can continue to use what's happening in our current world, what's happening with us individually in our disciplinary areas to constantly be thinking about how is our science best applied in a justice lens? How can we dismantle some of the barriers that are so typical at many of our institutions that are continuing to prevent those with voices, those that have ways that they can contribute to our science from doing so, and designing things from an equitable lens so that resources are more evenly distributed. And, we can talk about diversity, but we can do some things to make a difference in all of the communities in which we live and work. And if we're bringing in members of diverse communities, then it's important to make them feel included. And I'll just end with a couple more slides about the problem with some of the models that we continue to share about where the problems lie in science education. So how many of you have seen or heard, these pipeline models that are often used when we talk about STEM education, okay, especially when we respect to diversity. Very one-dimensional, this leaky pipeline. We start with millions of students in the school system. When we look at who's actually on a STEM pathway, there aren't very many. At the end, by the time they are college eligible and decide to major in STEM. So diagrams like this don't give much of an opportunity to think about, well, what's happening in the pipes? Like, why are we so focused on pointing out the deficits in the students that leave the STEM discipline? Shouldn't we be thinking more about what are we doing to help keep students in pathways to majors that produce evolutionary biologists and paleontologists and earth scientists who work on biodiversity and work at really interdisciplinary intersections of what we do. So I'm a fan of this model, this braided stream model, and yes, it's, I guess, drawing from my earth science roots, but this was a 2021 publication in an American Geophysical Union weekly magazine, EOS, where a group of atmospheric scientists really challenged us to just dismantle and disregard the whole pipeline model of mentoring and student development and developing STEM identity, and consider that there are multiple entry points and exits in STEM. Our disciplines are complex. Yes, they require a lot of training, but there's so many things that students acquire from informal education in STEM, from informal STEM experiences, engagement, as well as in K through 12 education. And many times, these all meet in ways that can encourage that pathway. but there's no one way to mentor or advise, or to model what's an ideal way to the major pathway. We have to meet individuals where they are, and be willing to use all these tools that we have at our fingertips now, to better engage the next generation of STEM professionals. And so I just encourage us to think, utilize, and be more open-minded about the way that we guide the next generation, the way that we interact with our colleagues when it comes to, again, achieving success in science. And so, I'll just leave you with this: as evolutionary scientists, we know that we've had to discount, old and traditional models and ways of thinking about progress. And so we should be able to continue to do that in our work, so that we can inspire, whole new kinds of individuals who love the work that we do, are curious about it, want to be scientists, to do this work. And I just want to thank all the terrific people that I have the benefit of working with at the University of California Museum of Paleontology. And thank you again to the Gould Prize Committee for honoring me with this award, and to all of you for welcoming me to your conference. And I'm excited to participate in a technical session this weekend too. So thank you very much. So I don't want to stand between refreshments and, but questions, or okay, sure. If anyone has questions, feel free to ask now. I'll certainly be at the reception if you want to ask me anything. But yeah, it's just really pleased to be able to deliver this plenary for you tonight. So thank you. Okay. Great.